And I think it's important for survivors to share our stories and experiences so that victims and survivors know that they're not alone and that they can get help. There's life after your abuse ends if you can get out. There's lots of help out there. And every time I tell my story, every time I speak, if one victim hears my voice and finds a way to get out of their situation, then I have succeeded.
Welcome to Voices of Hope, a four-part series where we explore the lived experiences of survivors navigating towards safety, hope, and healing with support from family justice centers and their partner agencies. Through honest conversations with survivors, advocates, attorneys, law enforcement, and youth program leaders, each episode reveals the transformative power of collaboration and the human stories that move us toward more effective services and support for survivors. From courtrooms and counseling rooms to campgrounds and police precincts, this series offers a rare window into what it truly means to support domestic and sexual violence survivors using a coordinated, trauma-informed, hope-centered approach. This podcast contains conversations about violence. The content may be difficult to hear, so please take care while listening. Hi. In our first episode of this four-part series, we're shining a light on the intersection of survival, escape, and the civil court system. Escaping an abusive partner is never as simple as walking away, especially when the legal process becomes part of the journey. First, you'll hear from Audra, a survivor who bravely shares her story of leaving her abusive partner and navigating the courts. Then we'll talk to Susie, Chief Legal Officer at Safe Alliance, who helps us understand how the civil legal system plays a pivotal, albeit challenging, role on the path to safety. Together, their perspectives reveal both the human cost and the systemic realities of seeking justice after abuse. Welcome. Our guest today is Audra Toussaint. She's joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, and she is the Director of Support at Origin PBC in Manhattan, a public benefits corporation dedicated to providing educational tablets to incarcerated individuals at no cost to them or their families. That's really cool. She also serves as the president of the board of directors for the Umbrella Center Foundation, where she is working to establish a family justice center in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. As a survivor of domestic violence, Audra draws on her personal experiences to advocate for change and empower others. Her most cherished role is a mother to her almost 13-year-old daughter, Kinsey. Audra is passionate about using her voice and experiences as a mother and survivor to transform the narrative for other victims and to combat violence in her community. For over 11 years, she has fought tirelessly for her safety and that of her daughter in family, criminal, and federal courts. When she's not working to improve educational opportunities for incarcerated individuals or advocating for victims of violence, Audra is focused on raising a strong-willed teenage daughter in today's complex world. I can relate to that. I have two daughters, one of which is a tween. I think there's a lot more hands-on parenting now than when we were growing up, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, welcome, Audra, to Voices of Hope. Can you tell us what made you decide to share your experiences today?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's empowering for me to speak about my experiences. It has helped me to heal on my journey from victim to survivor. And I think it's important for survivors to share our stories and experiences so that victims and survivors know that they're not alone and that they can get help. There's life after your abuse ends if you can get out. There's lots of help out there. And every time I tell my story, every time I speak, if one victim hears my voice and finds a way to get out of their situation, then I have succeeded. And really that's what I want people to know is there are victims and survivors among you that you don't even know about everywhere in every walk of life.
Okay, so, Audra, as much as you're comfortable with, would you mind sharing with us a little bit of what you endured when you were trapped in the cycle of abuse?
Sure. So I met my abuser in 2007 and yeah. And we ended up moving in together. He had two small children, two small boys. I fell in love with them. We ended up welcoming a daughter in 2012 and built a family. And I didn't see the signs of abuse for the first few years. After that, there were a couple of times when he shoved me, and I'm not minimizing that and saying, oh, it was nothing. It was something,
Sure.
but apologized the next day and promised it wouldn't happen again. And we moved forward. In late 2013, he is an alcoholic and his drinking was increasing and his belligerence toward me and verbal abuse was increasing to the point where toward the end of December, he was threatening me. He was going to take my daughter. He had this huge blow up with me. And shortly after that, I asked him to move out. I owned my home. I owned my car. I had a good job. I had a supportive family. And I like to tell people that because that's not the case for everyone. When he moved out, his abuse just intensified. Something snapped. He wouldn't leave me alone. He would stalk me and harass me. He would call me incessantly. He would text me. He would threaten me. Most of the abuse after he moved out was threats, and it's all about power and control. There were a couple of times when he physically assaulted me when I was exchanging my daughter with him, which I had to do as part of our custody agreement while I had a restraining order against him, which makes no sense at all in retrospect. The abuse went on for several more years. And even today, I would say, I don't know that I would say the abuse has stopped. It could start up again anytime. But by about 2016, 17, he started to settle down a little bit. He got an ankle bracelet in 2016 in after violating my restraining order. And I think that really started to change things for me. And then the last time he violated my restraining order, though, was he showed up at the beach when I was on vacation with my daughter in 2022. And so not that long ago. So it's kind of always always out there still. But
Yeah.
I'm not, it doesn't control my life anymore. And so through growing and healing, I've moved on from that in many ways. And now I just focus on my daughter and myself and our tribe of my neighborhood and my family and friends and have really healed and recovered from the trauma that I went through.
Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad that you've reached that spot where you said it doesn't control your life anymore because I feel like it easily could, and to no fault of your own. I mean, it's just the fact that he's relentless and he doesn't stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let me ask you, how familiar were you with the legal system before you became a survivor of domestic violence? Because it is a complicated system that I don't think a lot of people understand even a tiny sliver of until they are ensconced in it.
Absolutely. I had no experience. I had a speeding ticket in the 80s. That's about the only time I ever walked into a courthouse in my entire life. So I didn't know what to expect when I entered the world of the legal system.
Yeah. Well, when you were seeking safety from your ex abusive partner, what legal processes did you find yourself having to navigate?
The first thing that I navigated was getting a restraining order. My abuser was stalking me and harassing me. I got an attorney, not realizing that I didn't have to pay for an attorney. I could have gotten a free attorney through a local nonprofit called Safe Alliance. But I did get a family court attorney who advised me to go to the courthouse and file a restraining order. So that's the first thing I did. I spent probably an hour and a half writing my restraining order up and walked up to clerk's the clerk's desk and they said, "Thanks so much. Come back tomorrow. You missed the afternoon session." And that was my introduction to the legal system. And it was fitting because that's kind of how it goes in the legal system. It's not really designed around being convenient for a victim, it's really designed around a system. So I came back the next day and I filed that restraining order. I got an ex parte, which is a 10-day restraining order. My abuser was served and promptly texted me asking me what it was all about, thereby violating the ex parte restraining order. But I went to court with a family court lawyer and I was granted that first restraining order. I was granted that I had my restraining order renewed. That was 2014. I had it renewed in 2015, 2017, 2018, 2020, 2021, 22, 23, and did not renew in 2024 because my abuser was incarcerated. And after 11 years, I felt like if I needed a new one, I could go get a new one. Things have settled
Yeah.
down to some degree. But that was my first foray into the legal system. And as you can imagine, I spent a lot of time in the courthouse.
My God, every single year. So you couldn't get a lifetime order of protection, or maybe that wasn't something that you wanted to seek?
No, we don't have lifetime orders of protection in North Carolina. You can get a 1 or 2 year renewal. I had
Mm,
one judge renew it for 8 months for some reason, which is not a thing. But Yeah, you have to go back every 1 to 2 years and face your abuser in court again and ask for another restraining order.
That's gotta be re-traumatizing to a certain degree.
It really is, and, as the years passed, I used to say, "It's not as big of a deal anymore as it used to be," and that's true, but it still didn't mean it wasn't a big deal, and I would,
Right.
you know you get to about 6 months and you start thinking about how you've gotta go get it renewed again, and then for the weeks before, I was very triggered and stressed, and then it would last afterwards for a while. It would really shake me to go back into the court and into a courtroom and have my abuser accuse me of lying and all kinds of things in front of a judge and get to ask me all kinds of things in front of a judge. I got the first couple renewed on my own, but then I ended up calling Safe Alliance in 2015 because I was concerned about getting it renewed. That was my first introduction to them. They encouraged me to go get it renewed. I did that one on my own, but the next year I got a Safe Alliance attorney, pro bono attorney, and one attorney, and then a second one, Susie Canali, who represented me at 5 or 6 of my renewals.
Oh, that's awesome that
Yeah.
you had that support because I can't even imagine. I mean, most of us don't like to think about any of our ex relationships, much less one that involved abuse, and to have
Yeah.
to relive that on a yearly basis. I mean, that's not trauma informed at all, court
No.
system.
And as you probably know, there's a language that they speak in a courtroom. There
Hmm.
are protocols in courtrooms. If you're representing yourself, you're expected to represent yourself as if you're an attorney. And having an attorney there who specializes in domestic violence law took so much of the pressure off of me. I just knew I was in good, safe hands and so supported by that. It really was a wonderful service that Safe Alliance provides to victims and survivors.
Right. Yeah, because I've heard that from so many survivors that I've interviewed before about once you escape domestic violence, A, it doesn't just end. Leaving is not the final step. And B, it's almost like you need to go get a law degree as your next step in the midst of healing and recovering from trauma. Like that's the last thing that survivors need to do.
Absolutely. And that's just the criminal side of the court system. When he
Yeah.
violated my restraining order, which he did 11 times, he's
God.
been convicted of violating it 4 times, misdemeanor convictions. It's very difficult to get a felony conviction in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. I was represented by the district attorney's office, who were wonderful. But in family court, you're paying an attorney to represent you. And that's one of the most important places you can be because you're dealing with the custody of your child and sometimes child support.
Hmm. Which is a whole other ballgame, right? I mean, just a whole
Absolutely.
other traumatizing thing.
Yes.
Well, you talked a little bit about the support that you found from Safe Alliance. What role did family justice centers play in helping you to find that support?
Well, we don't have a family justice center in Mecklenburg County yet. We are building
That's right, you're
one.
starting one.
We are in mid construction, planning to open in late 2026. But I can tell you how it would have been different. I felt like I had to go to so many different places to get the help that I needed. I was at the courthouse. I had to go to the magistrate when he violated. I didn't know how that worked. I thought when you called 911, the cops came and then they went and got the bad guy. But that's not how it works. I didn't need economic assistance or childcare, or I didn't need to go to the hospital. I didn't need resources that so many victims do need when they are in an abusive situation or trying to leave. So I was lucky, but I still ended up having to spend days off of work going to getting different resources. If we had a family justice center, or when we do open those doors, the thought of just walking into a beautiful, warm, trauma informed building and having them wrap their arms around a victim figuratively and literally is just like gives me such comfort to think about. If I had just been able to go to that one place and tell my story to one person and then have them offer me the resources that they think that I might need. And I think one of the coolest things about family justice centers is you don't have to take them up on all of the resources that they're offering. If you don't want to file a police report, then you don't have to talk to the police. You can just
Mhm.
get economic assistance or get a plan to get out or get spiritual guidance. Whatever services you feel like you want are on the table, and you can pick whichever ones you want to have. I also think a lot about how my journey has been almost 12 years now. And I would have visited that family justice center over the years many times. Every time I needed my restraining order renewed, I would have gone to that same place. And not that where I went, Safe Alliance, wasn't a warm place too, but to
Mm.
have that one touchstone, that one place that you can go when you need it, if you need it, after the abuse has ended or you're out of the situation. Because as you know, the abuse doesn't always end when you leave. Mine actually intensified when I left, but
Mhm.
knowing that there's that one safe haven that you can go to, I feel like would have been a game changer for me.
Yeah. I think so many survivors would feel the same way. And I don't think that enough survivors know that family justice centers have that kind of array of options and that they can pick and choose what those
Yeah,
are. Because
absolutely.
would you not agree that traveling to a whole bunch of different places as a survivor of domestic violence and retelling your story, as you said over and over, is a deterrent to a lot of survivors reaching out for help?
Absolutely. You think about it. Like I said, I had a very supportive employer. They knew what was going on. They let me take off as much time as I wanted. But if you're walking into the courthouse, you're spending 4 hours there no matter what you're doing. So you're taking a half a day off from work. You're paying for parking. You're exposed when you park your car. If your abuser's going to the courthouse as well, you're both going to the same place and you're vulnerable in that moment. And
So
so
dangerous.
for someone who doesn't have a car or can't afford to pay for parking and can't take the time off to be able to just go to that one place and have a safe and secure place to park, to get into the building, and to
Mhm.
be able to get the help that you need in a timely fashion, I think is just invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what advice would you give a survivor who also needs to navigate the legal system?
One of the biggest pieces of advice I would give a survivor is if you are looking for justice in the justice system, there will be times that you will be sorely disappointed. There is no, that's not what the justice system is built for. It's not there to make you feel whole again. That's what your therapist is for. But at the same time, the legal system, the justice system can do the right thing, right? So I filed a restraining order, and when he violated it, I went to court. And when I went to court, I was represented by a district attorney who then advocated for me. And when he was found guilty, that gave, not that it gave me vindication, but it protected me, right? And
Hmm.
then he violated it again, and we did the same thing several times. But by having that restraining order in place, it gave me the ability to fight for myself in the legal system and to have that be on record that he had done that to me, right? And so I do, my father always says it's just a piece of paper, but I disagree because that piece of paper is the thing that then triggers the events that allow you to go to court and hold them accountable. And it took a long time for him to be held accountable. He finally served 1 year in prison for violating the probation that he was put on when he violated my restraining order one of the last times, and for a DUI probation violation that occurred in 2020. And because of COVID, it didn't get heard in court until 2024. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
it was probably 5 years after the violation. And I never thought he would see a day in prison, but he went. And, some people, I might think that that doesn't give you a sense of satisfaction, but I'll be honest, it gave me an immense sense of satisfaction because he deserved to pay for what he did to me. And so in the end, the justice system did hold him accountable for what he did. And that is something that I am grateful for.
Mhm. But you're right, it does take time. And a lot of people do argue that protection orders are just a piece of paper, and I report the violations and nothing happens. But like you demonstrated, you don't give up. You just keep reporting them over and over. And eventually, if you're lucky, someone pays attention to that and sees that the abuser is not honoring that order of protection. And then
Yes. And
accountability might happen.
yes, and as you were saying, what advice would I give? Also, just like you were saying, like every single time he violated my restraining order, it didn't matter what the violation was. I reported it. Like if you open the door an inch, they will push it all the way open. And so there were
Hmm.
times when people would say, how do you keep going? And I would say, I just get up and put one foot in front of the other every day and I won't stop. didn't really feel like there was an alternative. If I stopped fighting for myself, then I was giving up, and I feel like he would have come back stronger than ever. And so just to continue going, it can be demoralizing. It's okay. Cry in your car, go home, have some dinner, hug your kid, and get up and go and do it again the next day. And eventually, for me, it did pay off.
Just it takes incredible strength, though. You
Thank you.
you should know that.
Thanks.
If you could speak directly, and perhaps you will if they're listening, to court officials such as judges and civil legal attorneys, what advice or tips or questions would you give them when they're working with domestic violence survivors?
I think I would say to show them the same respect that the abuser gets. The abuser is innocent until proven guilty. And I understand that as a premise of our legal system, and it's a good one. But sometimes it felt like I was guilty until proven innocent. I feel like the crime of domestic violence is sometimes minimized. It's not in North Carolina, the law does not give a lot of protection to a victim. My abuser violated my restraining order 11 times, and he is not a convicted felon. That's not, that's not fair for sure. And
Mm.
I don't think it's right. I think that it's a very serious crime. You can vandalize a building and get more time than someone who beats his wife. And that's that says a lot about society, that we undervalue victims, mostly women, but not always, their lives. I never did feel like the crimes that he was committing against me were taken as seriously as I felt like they were affecting me. And every day, to the judges and attorneys, what happens in that courtroom happens, and then I had to walk out the door and keep living my life. And so protecting the victim, if there are very rare situations where a victim is lying. It's rare. You're not going to put yourself through what you have to go through in the courtroom if you're lying. And so if the what the victim is saying is plausible and you believe them, then use the teeth that you have, and early on, to try to stop that abuse, because mine went on for years, because it would be a slap on the wrist over and over again. He'd plead, he'd get probation, he would do no time, and then he would just
Mhm.
continue to stalk and harass me. So I think really enforcing, using the tools that they have at their hand and at their discretion, to really enforce the law, and to show people who abuse other people that it's not okay, and to really try to get them to change their ways.
Right. Absolutely, because, not holding abusers accountable only empowers them and only leads to an escalation of that abuse because they know that they can get away with it and they won't be held accountable. So they keep pushing it, like you said, pushing the door open a little bit more every time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would argue that most abusers don't think the rules apply to them. And so when you
Mhm.
go to court and it doesn't feel like the rules apply to them, then you're right, it empowers them. And they walk out of that courtroom thinking, they didn't do anything to me this time, they're not going to do anything to me next time. I'm just going to keep on doing it.
Yeah. So true. So true. Well, Audrey, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit of your story on Voices of Hope. And we so appreciate it. And we so are in awe of your strength continuing on with this process. We hope that you continue to stay safe.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Well, with the survivor's experience in mind, we're now looking at things from the court side. Suzanne E. Canali is the Chief Legal Officer with Safe Alliance in Charlotte, North Carolina. She currently oversees the legal services provided by Safe Alliance and manages the legal needs of the agency. She has focused her career on working with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Prior to joining Safe Alliance in 2018, she was a staff attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina, where she represented clients in domestic violence, custody, and consumer matters. Suzanne was named a 2024 Rising Star by the National Association of Women Lawyers and a 2024 Leader in the Law by North Carolina Lawyers Weekly. Oh, that's awful. So, congratulations, Susie, and thank you so much for being with us today on Voices of Hope.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, can you start by telling us a little bit about the work that you do with survivors of domestic violence?
Sure. So I have had the privilege for the last 13 and a half years. My career has really centered around representing survivors in civil domestic violence court. And so that consists of helping them obtain domestic violence protective orders, helping them renew those orders, and at times helping them navigate custody. Most recently, when I moved into the role of chief legal officer, I now oversee the legal services our agency provides. And so, Safe Alliance is a nonprofit in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our mission is to provide hope and healing to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Our legal program does that by all the pleadings we prepare for clients are reviewed by an attorney. We have attorneys who go to court and represent clients. We train pro bono attorneys to represent clients. And then part two of my role is kind of managing that risk for the agency. So I don't go to court quite as much as I used to, but I still like to get in there just to kind of make sure I know what's happening and what's going on locally in our court.
Sure. And is this something you've always wanted to do, work with survivors? Or is this something that kind
So
of just fell into your lap and you went with it?
when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to do public interest law. That was kind of all I knew. I didn't know where. And then it's actually funny. My very first summer of law school, I interned here at Safe Alliance with their brand
Oh,
new legal representation program. And I sat in with an attorney interviewing a survivor. And I was like, this is what I wanna do. Like, the way she was able to hear the survivor, then advocate for them, and so I started volunteering at Safe Alliance in law school whenever I was home as a court advocate, so not doing legal services, accompanying survivors to court, and I really just got this narrow focus and have been very lucky that I have been able to keep kind of adding to that and really stay within in this area.
that's amazing that you do that and that you wanted to do that because I just feel like survivors are such an underserved area in the legal system. And we need more people who have experience in working with survivors and know sort of the nuance and tactics of abusers. So it's always good to talk to somebody who is doing that for survivors and doing that full time. Can you tell us a little bit about some misconceptions, specifically with the restraining order process and also just anything in general with the civil court process? What are some things that people think might be happening there that actually are a lot different?
Sure. So I think the biggest misconception about the process is that it's gonna be quick. I think that a lot of times cases are well, initially they're continued, and then even after someone, if they successfully obtain their protective order, if they have children in common, or they still have a criminal case, or they wanna renew their order, that process is going to be ongoing. And so I think that one really important piece is that it's a long process, and that protective order is sometimes just like a first it's an important step, but it's a first step in that process.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of survivors think that it's going to kind of be like an instant fix, but
Yeah.
they have to continue to go back over and over, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
that's,
that that can be incredibly daunting to have to like reface their abuser over and over and to kind of keep thinking about it. Protective orders in general, there's this misconception around what protective orders do and what protective orders can't do. And so I think it's really important to recognize that protective orders are one part of a safety plan. I think they're a really important part, or I wouldn't have dedicated my career to helping people obtain them, but they are one component, and I think it's important to recognize that survivors still need other services. They still need safety planning. They still need access to resources. And I will say, I think my favorite part about protective orders, though, too, is they don't just provide safety, they really can help increase economic mobility for survivors by giving them possession of a residence, preventing them from being unhoused, or giving them access to a vehicle. And I think it's really important to recognize all the tools within a protective order so that an individual survivor can take advantage of those tools as they need to early on in the court process.
yeah. And I think that's another misconception too among like survivors, advocates to the general public is that, I've heard people call a protective order just a piece of paper. It's just a slip of paper. And I know that there are some survivors out there who, when offered a protective order, just say, well, it's not going to do anything. He's not going to stop harassing me or stop stalking me because of a piece of paper. But you point out there's so many different facets of a protective order beyond just the order to
stop communicating with that survivor, right? Yes.
Absolutely. And it what I the other piece that I think is it criminalizes any contact. So even if it's, we see abusers go through this cycle of they abuse and then they're so sorry and it'll never happen again. And the protective order criminalizes any contact, even that message that just says, I'm sorry, I love you. And I think that when we empower survivors to know that, it helps the order have more teeth because then they can be held criminally accountable for that
Hmm.
contact. And I think protective orders are important. They're not for everyone, but I think it's important, to your point, to understand what they can do and what they can't do so every survivor can make the best decision for themselves as to whether or not that's a tool that's going to help them.
Right, exactly. Because only the survivor knows exactly the extent that the abuser will go to. But
Yeah.
I like your point. We don't need your sorries. That's also criminally accountable.
Yeah.
You can just keep those. Can you tell us how professionals like yourself can better prepare survivors for experiencing the legal system, like going to court or testifying, which sounds very daunting and intimidating?
Biggest piece of advice that I could give is be authentic. The system is flawed. And I think it's important to prepare survivors for what they're going to encounter and do it in a supportive way. When I first started practicing, I just kind of had this like fixer mentality. And I was like, if they had this drug case, I'm like, we're going to go to court. It's going to be fine. I'm going to be there. And I didn't really like take into account it's not gonna be fine. I mean, we might get the outcome we want, but there's going to be these moments where you are going to be triggered, you are going to be traumatized, and I think when I started really understanding that being authentic in that helps my clients have better outcomes, it helped prepare them mentally for what they were going to face, and then it helped them have more choice, and it was more humanizing to own that because I think our system I mean, we talk about it with, like, Audra's case, like, she had to keep coming back to court repeatedly. She had to keep facing her abuser, and so now I have better conversations around, like, "This might be a bad fact, but let's talk about how we're gonna overcome that," or, "This is really what cross-examination is gonna look like," and it helps me the nice thing is we have advocates in our office, so when you think about, like, the Family Justice Center model and different roles people can play, it's great because now I can prepare my client for the negative, but then also have someone who can come in or and can kind of say, "And here's some ways maybe let's talk about how to navigate that when it happens on the stand." Like when the defendant's attorney starts cross-examining you or it starts to feel like you're more on trial. And I just think the more we own and acknowledge the problems, the better we're equipping survivors to face them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think to some extent, an emotional safety plan, if you will, is just as important as a physical one to, like you said, prepare for those triggers. Because I can't even imagine how re traumatizing it is to go back into court and tell a bunch of strangers with your abusive ex partner watching you everything that happened. I mean, it's almost like you kind of have to play therapist sometimes, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think sometimes, like, so often I'm glad you mentioned that because I think so often emotional safety planning gets left out of the conversation around safety planning because that immediate need when you're talking with someone is, "Are you safe tonight?" Like, "What's your physical safety?" That emotional safety is so important, and it's so unique to each person, so I think really being present and knowing, being honest, and being with them, like, I tell my, like, clients, like, I'm gonna be there with you. I will object when this happens. These are some things that may happen, and we talk about how to navigate that. Because to your point, it is so unfair to the victim to have to keep retelling, and a lot of times it seems like some of the protections are put in place to make sure the abuser has that fair day in court, and it doesn't always feel like those same protections are there, for the survivor.
No. Mm-mm. It's, I would agree with that. Can you tell me a little bit about the role that family justice centers play in helping you be successful in your work with survivors?
So the family justice model, I think, is such a game changer for success. And so our county is working on opening our family justice center in the fall of 2026. Right now, we have what we call our survivor resource center, which is the precursor to that center. And so it's given us time to start practicing with our partners and providing that support. And already I just feel like as the service provider, I feel like there's a little bit of a weight lifted because it's to your
Mm.
point. Now there's other people who are skilled in different areas who can really come in and provide those kind of holistic services. And I can focus on the legal piece. And for the survivor, it really minimizes it creates one place that is less that produces less of that trauma from the retelling of the story. And I love how it's so focused on the survivor's needs and what will help them and taking off some of that burden.
Mhm. Is there anything that you would want to tell survivors who are hesitant to maybe reach out to a family justice center when yours opens or any other family justice center throughout the country who might think, like I don't know if I want to go through with everything with legal dealings with law enforcement with all those things.
I think I would say you don't have to know. And it's really the Family Justice Center provides you the opportunity to learn what you want because it's not one size fits all. I think that's something we think like we want. Healing is not linear. No two survivors are exactly the same. And so I think I would encourage them to reach out. There's confidentiality there's different partners have different levels of confidentiality in those pieces, but reach out and learn because there's so many partners in the Family Justice Center, but that doesn't mean the survivor has to take advantage of every partner if they don't want to. And so I would say reach out to a community that is there focused on creating positive outcomes and see if there's a source that's helpful. And if you come to a Family Justice Center and you're like, I'm not ready for any of these services, that's fine. Come back. I think that's the other
Hmm.
piece is the goal isn't that someone just comes once, it's that they continue to come and receive services, and I think I would want everyone to know, we are here, we are ready, and we will meet you wherever you are in your journey, whatever your goals are, to provide you support, to your point, Amanda, for that physical and emotional safety.
Yeah, that's such a good point too, because I mean, we always say on domestic shelters is only a survivor knows when it's safest to leave. So people shouldn't be telling them, well, just leave, just walk out the
Yeah,
door, just go do this. Like it's so simple,
exactly.
because it's not always like that. So sometimes it's good to sort of see what your options are, what your plan can be. And then when you're ready and when you know it's safe, take advantage of those services like a family
Absolutely.
justice center. Yeah. Well, I'm excited for yours to open next year. And thank you for coming on Voices of Hope and telling us all about the civil side of the court system. And good luck with your future cases and helping survivors. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast was brought to you by the Family Justice Center Alliance, a program of Alliance for Hope International. To locate a family justice center near you, visit allianceforhope.org. Voices of Hope is hosted by me, Amanda Kippert, and edited by Produce Your Podcast, which can be found at produceyourpodcast.com. This podcast is supported by the Office on Violence Against Women through the U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the views of the U.S. Department of Justice or the Office on Violence Against Women. Whether you're experiencing abuse, questioning a relationship, or looking to learn more about domestic violence, you can find information, resources, and support, and search for advocates in your area at domesticshelters.org.